listening to Cody Lundin's Keep Your Ass Alive, where Cody teaches real people real skills, giving raw, hard survival advice with a hug. And now, broadcasting from somewhere in a high desert wilderness, here's Cody.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Keep Your Ass Alive. I'm your host, Cody Lundin, and now we're going to do another episode of Down the Barrel. And in this case, Down the Barrel, I'm answering the questions that you've emailed to me at keepyourassalive@gmail.com. So let's get right to it. So, hey, Christopher Smith wrote and said, hey, Cody, where can I buy your books? Well, I have two books. One was published in 2003 called 98.6 Degrees, The Art of Keeping Your Ass Alive. That deals with modern survival skills regarding a wilderness mishap, lost day hiker, etc., and a survival kit for desert mountain regions. The second book is When All Hell Breaks Loose, Stuff You Need to Survive When Disaster Strikes, and that's Urban Preparedness, With or Without Zombies. Both of those can be purchased at codylundin.com. They're also real books from a real publisher, so you could order them online, Amazon, God help me, or at a thing called a bookstore. So that's that. Thanks, Christopher, for that. The next question is from John Strelo. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. How do you take the inside of the gourd without making a big hole? I'm assuming you mean for a gourd canteen and you're not talking some weird porn overseas. So making a gourd canteen, how do I take the inside out? The drinking hole is important on a gourd canteen. If you make it too big, it's really hard to cork. And if the hole is too big on a gourd canteen, you can have problems with things from honeybees and especially in arid regions that are trying to get that water. And if you have a bee, as an example, fly into a gourd canteen, which is of course opaque, you can't see through it, you can get hurt, right? You can get stung. And if that sting turns into anaphylaxis and you stop breathing because your throat swells up, that's super bad. So what I like in a gourd canteen hole for my sizes is about the size of a 50-cent piece. A lot of you youngins don't know what those were. They used to have, I think, John F. Kennedy. Wasn't that right, Tony? Didn't they have John F. Kennedy on the half dollars? Yes, they did. So I like about that size of a hole in my gourd canteen. It's more practical to drink and it's easy to cork. And how I take the inside guts out of that gourd canteen, because inside the gourd, regardless of what species you have, you're going to have a bunch of pith, which, by the way, that pith sometimes can be used for flint and steel as char cloth. So if I took a piece of pith out of a gourd and had a rock on the Mohs scale of hardness, a 7 or greater, here in Arizona, it's going to be a jasper, chalcedony quartz or something like that, and strike a spark off the back of my carbon steel blade, I can use that pith inside the gourd, kind of the gourd guts. And a lot of times that will hold a spark. And then, of course, you can put that smoldering piece of gourd pith into a tinder bundle and blow it into flames. You're getting more than you bargained with, John, on this. What I do is get what I call the gourd cleaning stick. I get a stick about yay long, depends on the size of the gourd, with a slight bend, take my knife, cut a bevel off on the end, and then I'll have a student go in with that stick, because invariably that pith that we're talking about that could be potentially used to make a fire is stuck on the perimeter of the gourd. God knows what you're going to get when you open a gourd. It's like Christmas every time. You never know what you're going to get. It's a Forrest Gump thing. And we're going to use that stick and scrape off the inside. Always have a bag for the seeds. You don't want to be responsible for altering a bioregion by spreading gourd seeds out where they do not belong. And we put the pith and the gourd seeds in a bag and use that cleaning stick for round one. When I look in the gourd of a client's, and assess it, I try to drop the sunlight down there and say, yeah, it looks clean enough. Then I send them down to the river and they put like a cheap milkshake solution of really fine gravel or sand, like a cheap milkshake solution. They fill that gourd up halfway and they swish it. So what this does is the water helps absorb into that the rest of the pith that didn't come out with the dry cleaning of the stick. and we're trying to clean that gourd from the inside out with that milkshake solution of gravel, we dump the gravel out in the water, do it again, dump the gravel out in the water, do it again, and try to get the inside of that gourd as clean as possible. So really, you only need a hole like that big to get all of this done. You'll be taking some pieces of pith out with your fingers. It depends on what you get from the gourd gods about how difficult that gourd is to clean. I hope that answers your question. So next question is from Joe Smith. What kind of wood did you use for the hand drill in the Split Up episode? I'm assuming you mean the show Dual Survival. I don't like to talk about corporate TV shows on this podcast because I want to offer the viewer something of real value, but I will answer this question. Split Up was in Arizona, the Arizona episode. So what I used for the hand drill, and for those that don't know what a hand drill is, a hand drill, I have something called a drill. It's a piece of wood that I'm spinning in my hands. I'm sure you've seen it on the TV. And then I have a piece called a fireboarder hearth, which is the female element, which is on the ground. And I'm spinning the male element of the wood with downward pressure and speed into the fireboarder hearth, similar to a bow drill, but that's without the socket or the bow. And we cut a notch, etc. It's a whole big rigmarole to make a hand drill set and use it. But the ember comes out of that hearth, just like it would with a bow drill set. So the wood I used for the spindle or drill is seep willow. The Latin on that is Baccharis glutinosa. There's another Baccharis in California that the guys use out there. I love that wood for hand drill and bow drill. But you in your state will have something that works for you. I mean, the good Lord didn't say this state can make fire, but you guys are screwed. So every place on the planet has something that indigenous peoples use to make fire with. So that's what I used for the spindle or drill of the hand drill set. What I used for the fireboarder hearth was yucca. There's several species of yucca in Arizona. The Latin I used on this was yucca elata, E-L-A-T-A. So again, knowing the Latin, which I don't on a lot of plants, is important because you can differentiate that plant from anyone other in the world by knowing that Latin name. Seep willow for the drill, yucca for the base, and that's pretty much my pride and joy. That's my choice in Arizona for a hand drill set. Next question is from Nathan John Sprunger. Why wear shorts all the time? They're cheaper than pants to buy. Actually, not now anymore. I like to acclimate my body. And if you've read the book 98.6 Degrees, you understand acclimatization. I go over that a little bit in that book about the mitochondria. There's that word again. And about doing more with less as far as thermoregulation. Now, keep in mind, thermoregulation via hypo and hyperthermia are the most common ways to die, period, by far. Sometimes even in your home in grid down situations. Hypothermia, which we'll talk more about this later, I'm sure, on another episode, is a drop in core body temperature below 98.6 degrees or 37 degrees Celsius for the rest of the world. And hyperthermia is a rise in the body's core temperature above 98.6 degrees or 37 degrees Celsius. And of course, dehydration exacerbates both of those things. So I wear shorts and little clothing, even when it starts to get cold, as much as I can, so I can force my body to acclimate more to cold weather. So what happens when you have seasons, unless you're hanging out in Hawaii right now, and if you are, hey, Big Island, how are you doing? Is you go from summer to fall to winter. You don't go from summer to winter. So the seasons adjust slowly. And if you simply adjust with those seasons and don't just start throwing on big, heavy coats, your body can adapt to a certain extent. It's called acclimatization with a Z, where the mitochondria, the little thermostats or heat-producing furnaces in the cells are actually forced to be more efficient and produce more heat. And that's a whole big, long physiological spiel that even I'm not aware of half the information in that. If I wore adequate clothing, I wouldn't achieve that, because repeated exposure to cold, not dangerous exposure to cold like you're dead, but repeated exposure to cold of being uncomfortable, like training in a gym or doing anything that's uncomfortable where you get benefit from that uncomfortableness, is one of the ways that you achieve the ability to wear less clothing and do more in cold weather with less. The reason I do that is I'm a survival instructor. That's my profession. That's my passion. And I like to acclimate my body. Same reason for going barefoot. Again, I like to train my body all the time because I'm out in the field with students and I want to keep it trained. So the next question is from Amy Abrams Magyar. Sorry, Amy, if I didn't get the last name right. Have you always had a ring in your nose? Well, I guess I'd rather have a ring in my nose than a ring in my ear. What is that called? Tinnitus? Or isn't that, Tony, called tinnitus or whatever? I'm glad I don't have that. No. You imagine the pain my mother would have felt if I had a nose ring as she was birthing me. So I put that in a long time ago when it was hip. It's not hip anymore, although I've seen a lot more nose rings in the past decade. 90s, I think I've had it, early 1990s. And it's the same nose ring. I think I got it in some cool hippie shop in Tucson, Arizona. And I like it a lot. And they wanted me on a certain TV show to take it out and catch fish with it for corporate monies. And I said no to that. I'm not taking out my nose ring for you guys. So the next name, I don't know if this is a real name. If it is, you had hippie parents. Riverman Rip. Riverman Rip says, hey, Cody. Okay, now I understand. Ever been to a rainbow gathering? Actually, I have been to a rainbow gathering. It was in eastern Arizona. If you don't know what a rainbow gathering is, Google it. Picture 25,000 eclectic hippie-type people, at least 10,000 that are on heavy drugs and alcohol, in some back wilderness setting, actually getting along and doing more with less. I went to a rainbow gathering because I was curious and I was single. Just kidding on the last one. Because I wanted to see how they managed people. People management is a huge part of what I do as an outdoor survival instructor. I manage people under stress in remote environments. That's part of what the deal is if you actually teach in the wilderness. And so I went there to check it out and hang out and also see how they managed to feed all these people with dubious health conscious habits and sanitation practices without everyone blowing chunks and crapping their pants and etc. And on a side note, this is a very loose organization. That's why you can't really, because they're doing this technically illegally on federal land, but there's no one to arrest, right? Because it's a loose affiliation of people. I found how they dealt with serving food on an obscure website years ago. And I took some of that information and put it in my second book, When All Hell Breaks Loose, for a survival kitchen as an example of what I learned from the Rainbow family. Obviously, when you have a stoned hippie come up with this bowl that has crusty tofu on it from 3 days ago, you don't want that bowl over the big pot of falafel or whatever you're eating. And also the serving ladle of the servers, they're not dipping, right? Don't let the stoned hippie serve themselves, for God's sake. So they have servers. They never touch the serving spoon to the stoned hippie's bowl with crusted tofu on them. So there's no contact. So on field courses, we do that too. And you'd be amazed at how many people on my courses will hog their bowl right over the food pot and start dropping sand and leaves and whatever are into it. So we're used to, in our modern society, not having to pay attention to sanitation and hygiene. Now that's going to bite you in the ass in a grid down situation, because one of the biggest problems you'll probably have is lack of hygiene and sanitation. Diarrhea comes to mind, dysentery comes to mind, food poisoning, etc. So knowing how to manage and keep your tribe safe by something as simple as serving food could literally keep your ass alive. So get in that habit now. Next time you're at the barbecue with the beanie weenies and whatever, teach your family proper sanitation and hygiene when they're in that line, control the pets, etc., because that literally might be a deal breaker for you. Remember, the devil's usually in the details. Rarely is someone killed by the grizzly attacking. They're killed by the little things that they blew off. It's called Murphy's Law, and Murphy's a real bitch, right? So we want to avoid that at all cost. Next question is from Jevi Vrojas. Again, sorry about this if I don't pronounce your name right. Hey, Cody, have you been in Colombia, South America? I have not. I've been in South America a few times, but never to Colombia. Now, when I ask some people that are world travelers, I won't say who they are, the question invariably comes up, hey man, which country has hot women? Natural question, at least for dudes, right? And more than once, the answer has been Colombia. So I must visit Colombia, not just for the hot women, of course, I would never do that, but for the beautiful jungle I heard it has. But haven't been there, but it's definitely on my bucket list. Next question is from Eric Frein. Cody, do you wear shoes when you travel? Okay, what do you mean by that? In the airport, trying to get on the plane, stepping over the puke in Bangkok after the tuk-tuk, so I'll answer what I think you mean. Now, you can go into an airport, I'm not saying do this. For God's sake, don't go into an airport barefoot, right? But I do, because that's what I do. And no one really says anything. If you try to board a plane barefoot, I've had numerous things happen. Some angry dude guy who got all aggro with me. I was in my seat and took my flip-flops off. I used to call them thongs. But then when I told people I took off my thong, I got weird looks, and I get enough of those. I'd have my flip-flops off, innocently sitting in my plane seat, and this asshole stewardess, male, started ripping me a new one because I better put my shoes on sitting in my seat. That's the closest I came to getting arrested, probably with a full-blown fist fight on an airline. It is policy for most airlines where you are not going to be able to board that plane in the United States of America. Now, if you're in Laos or Thailand, maybe you can board that plane, because I have barefoot. Now, the last time I flew, I just was asked to do a podcast in Montana, and they flew me up there, and it was just a few weeks ago. And I had the stewardess, as sweet as pie, say, I'm so sorry that we had to have you put on your flip-flops before you boarded this plane. And I thought that was sweet as honey. So when I got off the plane, I said, do you know that's the sweetest, kindest thing that any stewardess has ever said to me? And she just was like, oh, and just blushing. True story. So airports, I go barefoot. I have flip-flops or thongs in my backpack or whatever to board the plane. Going into an airport bathroom barefoot is a tetanus need, an immunization potential, but maybe that's why I'm so bomber and have strong genes, because I've walked in a lot of different type of things. And the nice thing about being barefoot is you can wash your feet. Not a lot of people wash their shoes. Next question. Chris Neff. What percentage of salt in the water is acceptable? In boot camp, I remember them giving us, quote, e-water, which was just water with added electrolytes and salted to prevent cramping on runs. Well, natural sodium, body saline, is 0.9%, and ocean water is about 3.5%. So you're looking at, like, in a liter of seawater would be like seven teaspoons of salt. So if normal body saline is 0.9 and we're like way over the edge drinking ocean water, the Manson family tried to do that up their butts, if you've seen that episode, That's part of the reason if you read stories about shipbound sailors, which I do because I like survival stories because it's part of my job. When they get desperate enough, if they do, to consume seawater, they die a very painful, horrible death and usually have to be held down and or shot and thrown overboard or eaten if it's long in the journey. So this gets into pee drinking. We'll talk about pee drinking probably later on in another episode about why not to do it. But, urine is double body saline, easy. And that's when you're pissing clear. So saline pulls water from the cells. Okay, so you're dehydrating from the inside out. Now, the sodium-potassium balance within the cell is important through the lipid membrane of the cell. And then we'll talk about sports drinks later and whatever, electrolytes. That's what those are, part of it, potassium, sodium, potassium, that flip-flop through the cell membrane. So if we don't have salt, we die. But if we have too much salt, we die. So don't drink your piss. Don't drink ocean water. And whatever you had in the boot camp, the e-water, I'm assuming it was some sports drink type thing or watered down thing on that respect. Because when you're, in the military and you're humping with these packs and doing runs, you're going to need more than probably just water for that sort of strenuous activity. We'll probably talk later about electrolyte solutions because it comes up a lot and it's $1 billion industry. Next question is from Steve Kendrick. Wife and I were wondering, and we may have missed it somewhere, are you married? And if so, do you have a family? Stephen, I don't talk about my personal life in public. I like to keep things private and safe. So I won't answer that question, but I ain't single. I'll put it to you that way. And we already know my feelings on women from the Columbia answer. Okay. So next question, Kevin Morgan, let me ask, can you answer me if you want, but would you wear hemp clothing? Be prepared. Now, I think you meant wear instead of were. Kevin is clearly smoking his hemp clothing. Let me read that one more time because Kevin was, clearly under the influence. Let me ask, okay, you can answer me if you want to, but would you wear hemp clothing? Be prepared. Sure. I don't see why not. I don't see the drawbacks of that. The outdoor clothing, which is a whole topic in itself. I'll probably talk about summer clothing in an episode of Keep Your Ass Alive. I'll probably talk about winter clothing in an episode of Keep Your Ass Alive because they're involved, both. No problem with hemp, but I haven't studied hemp about what it does for thermoregulation. Like does it hold water, if I was sweating in the wintertime or whatever. So I don't know, but I have no problem with hemp clothing. I've heard it's pretty tough. So yeah, I would say yes, Kevin. Next question is from Heather Taylor. My 8-year-old daughter was wondering about the strips of fabric you wear in your ponytails. Well, I don't have your 8-year-old daughter's name, but this is velvet I have within my braids because I'm worth it. And this is an old t-shirt that I use for ties. I cut off this part of a t-shirt and tie it around. So nothing very glamorous, but it gets the job done. I am from part Viking ancestry, so I'm not trying to play Native American. Lundin is Swedish. That's where the name comes from. So I'm a heavy part Scandinavian, and my ancestors look like this as they were killing your ancestors thousands of years ago. And I apologize about that. We just wanted all your shit and your land, and I'm sorry. Okay. Next question. Patricia Pollard Willis. I've been researching the pros and cons of wool socks as opposed to synthetic. What's your opinion? P.S. I ordered your book. It should arrive soon. Okay, I don't have any context, Patricia, as far as, we're talking desert survival, winter survival. I'm assuming you mean cold weather because most people do. Pros and cons of wool socks as opposed to synthetic. Now, you know about my non-shoe fetish. but I do like socks. And I do, on the survival show, talk about wearing 3 pairs of non-threadbare wool socks in the snow. Now, that wasn't my idea. That was the great Mors Kochanski, who's since passed away in Alberta, Canada, one of my greatest survival mentors ever, to myself and a lot of other people. He taught me that pretty much in 1989 or 1990, that he would wear 3 pairs of non-threadbare. What that means is don't wear your shitty holy socks for this exercise. He would use a smaller pair initially over his bare foot, and then he would, like, let's say the large, and then he would use an extra large pair over that. And most sock companies just run small, medium, large, extra large. So for me, I use the large pair initially over my bare foot, and then I use 2 extra large pairs over that. What you don't want to do is compress the insulation. And that's part of why people's feet are so cold in the winter, is they, 1, have crappy socks, and 2, they're trying to shove that foot into a deep, damp area called a boot or shoe. And then 3, they tie the laces super tight so their shoes don't get lost, which cuts off the circulation, and the feet sweat a tremendous amount per day. So you have this dark, wet environment that's where the conduction is present, because you're standing on the ground, even through insulated boots, and the insulation is compressed in your sock because of your body weight, and the insulation is compressed in the sock because you've really tied it on real tight. And the answer to that is frostbite or frost snap. So when Mors taught me that, it was like, this is my Mors accent, with this 3 sock method, the sweat just evaporates away. And when he was in really slushy snow, like we have a lot in Arizona, what he would do is, remember that show, My 3 Sons? It's on reruns, do. And there's those loafers they have in the really cryptic intro, like the wingtips your dad used to wear, or maybe still does. And they have those little rubber galoshes that can be cut way down just to keep your dad's dress shoes dry when he's going to the job he hates in Chicago. Mors would do that. He would take that rubber bootie and cut the top down even more so that the sweat would evaporate out of the top of that sock to keep that foot drier. Another thing he would do is, if he was in damp snow and found dry snow, is he would literally walk in those socks, and the dry snow would suck out the water from those socks. And of course, I've done that several times. So if you're wearing socks in this fashion, I know I'm on this weird tangent. You just asked about the difference, and I will answer your question. But since we're on this crazy tangent, the colder the snow is, now this sounds weird, well, cold snow, well, yeah, some snow is colder than others. And the colder the ambient outdoor temperature is, the better the 3 sock method works. Okay. The warmer and the sloppier the snow, the worse it works. So, Patricia, I'm a big wool fan in general. Some people, ultramarathoners, whatever, get into the synthetic liner socks and then a wool. And again, it depends on the context, and I don't have that. So I'm going to make the context for you and do that. You're dressing out to go whatever in the wintertime, and give me wool. When it's cold, my desert mentor, Dave Gansey wears wool socks on his desert survival courses. So he likes wool in hot desert heat, and other people do as well. And then, of course, wool in heavy cold has been known for thousands and thousands of years. It used to be felted, right? That's a Mongolian thing. Maybe we can talk about that later. So, Patricia, that's a long-winded way of saying I kind of like wool. The thing I like about wool, since we're on a survival show here, if you're around fires a lot with synthetic anything, I hope you like your clothing glued to your skin, because invariably that ember is going to pop out of the fire, melt through the synthetic, which is essentially plastics, and melt into your skin. Not pleasant. The cool thing about wool is it's really hard to burn, and the coals bounce off. So if you talk to a lot of the hardcore dudes in Minnesota, the lumberjacks, the outdoor guides in northern Minnesota, Maybe they have a synthetic underlayer. We'll talk about that later with winter survival clothing, but they are wool freaks. Give me wool, give me wool, give me wool, because they're around fire a lot. Next question is Kirahi Rose. Man, that's a cool name. Kirahi Rose. Plane crashes in extreme cold and heavy snow. You're in shorts and flops. First thing one needs to do. Kirahi, that's a long, involved question with jack shit for context, and it's almost time to end this episode of Keep Your Ass Alive Down the Barrel. I promise you, at one of these episodes, we'll come back and answer your question as best I can do with almost little context from you. That's been this episode of Keep Your Ass Alive Down the Barrel. You can email us a question. Maybe I'll answer it on the show at keepyourassalive@gmail.com. Stay safe. Always remember to party on, and we'll catch you on the flip-flop. Hey campers, so that's it for this episode of Keep Your Ass Alive. Tune in next time and we'll talk to people just like you about survival advice or whatever floats your boat. Want to watch the only survival show on Earth, created, hosted, and produced by a real survival instructor? Check out The Survival Show with Cody Lundin at thesurvivalshow.com. Want to take your learning to the next level? Please visit my Aboriginal Living Skills School at www.codylundin.com. We offer field courses in modern outdoor survival, primitive living skills, or urban preparedness to enhance your self-reliance, confidence, and safety in the city or the wilderness.
Visit www.codylundin.com today.